Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today. It's Ali Coram and Ed Carson with a breakdown of the action in today's session, Friday, August 30th, the last day of the month. And Ed, you are not Mike Webster, but you are a great Friday co-host, and I'm so glad to see you.
It's great to see you too, Ali. And want to take a look at a few stocks, a lot of interesting action today. I want to take a look at Broadcom, Comfort Systems, and NextEra Energy.
Okay, well, we'll take a look at those three stocks, but first let's take a look at the major indexes. And I actually want to start with the S&P 500, up 1% by session's close. The Nasdaq on the day up 1.1%, the Dow up a little more than 0.5%, and the Russell 2000 up about 0.5%. So circling back to the S&P 500 here, Ed, looks like a pretty strong close to me. We've started a power trend, and you were telling the team is a little ironic. Certain someone having a power outage at the start of a power trend.
But yeah, so that does show that it's not necessarily a buy signal right away. But yeah, nice action here. If we do get over 1%, I guess we call that a subsequent follow-through day. But right at the top here of this range would be nice to get to. The Nasdaq, well, the S&P actually, I think the volume of the NYSE might be lower, but the Nasdaq was clearly a subsequent follow-through day. So that one is a positive to get above the 50-day line. But back to the S&P, yeah, we have, today marked the start of a power trend. Yesterday could have been, but we didn't quite close positive. So now we have the various factors. I mean, 50-day line rising, we're above the, 21-day line above the 50-day line for enough days. And so that's just sort of a new phase. It's saying things are really sort of have picked up momentum. It's not necessarily a huge buy signal by itself, but it's the kind of thing that if you do see buying opportunities, it makes you feel like you can be a little more aggressive. It just sort of gives you that edge. It's sort of like that plus factor. It doesn't mean you necessarily run out today. I think getting above this range would be really important, especially for like the S&P, and getting the Nasdaq more decisively above its 50-day line would be things, just because those two together, because it wouldn't take much for the Nasdaq, which had an inside day today. It was a subsequent follow today, but it was an inside day, so it's an odd thing. It almost, it was in danger of going below the 21-day line, would be a negative signal. So the market is still at sort of, it's still some mixed signals out there. But if the Nasdaq can move up there with the S&P, you're going to see a lot of buying opportunities. There's a lot of stocks that look like the S&P and look like the Nasdaq. So I think investors definitely should be taking note. I think the power trend also is another way, stepping back. We've gone a long way since August 5th. And so even though this week was sort of mixed, I think the S&P was essentially flat for the week. The Nasdaq was down. The S&P did end up turning higher. It was a really nice last 20 minutes or so, last hour, but sort of flat. But we've come a long way, and I think that power trend sort of says that we've made some real progress. It's not just this rally sort of taking hold, and so a lot of generally positive action over the last few weeks.
Right. And with a power trend, that means we're trending above some shorter term moving averages in addition to a number of other factors. But when you get these trending markets, like you said, that's when you can be more aggressive, as long as those conditions hold, as long as you're making progress, as long as you're seeing the stocks underneath the surface setting up and acting right. So this is a good development, but as you mentioned, Ed, it wouldn't take much for the Nasdaq here to not look too great. We have made a lot of progress. So one could say right here, hey, maybe this is the ideal scenario to unfold after the power that we saw. It felt like things were getting stretched and we needed them to pause, form handles, these proper bases. Well, maybe now we're getting that. So are we, right on the verge of some really compelling buying opportunities in the tech sphere here, maybe leaning more towards the non-tech areas with that S&P 500 outperformance? Or are we going to see a further deterioration here of the Nasdaq? It wouldn't, like you said, it wouldn't take much either which way.
Yeah, and I think that's why investors who probably built up their exposure a fair amount, especially from the follow through day on August 13th, and it wouldn't have taken much over the next week or two. you don't necessarily need to be really aggressive right here. Again, you can be
Mhm.
judicious. You can take there have been buying opportunities during this pause.
Right.
So you certainly could have been adding things, but I think the real thing is to be waiting to see, not waiting, looking, really preparing to see which way to go. We start moving higher, there's going to be a lot of things very quickly. So you want to have all those things
Mhm.
ready, all your watch list really ready to go. And you also have to have your exit strategies. I think one reason beyond just having your exit strategy is that it's probably a good idea because it's easy to think bullish. You can think if this happens, all these things are going to be bullish. But just having that, wait a second, what if this goes
Yeah.
lower? That just by allows to keep your emotions, even if just you can just mix your positive and bearish and bullish emotions to try to keep an even keel, will also let you know, like, wait a second, this could, all these things that are starting to look good could look pretty bad with just a day or two. So
Mhm.
a really important week. We have a long weekend, so don't waste it spending time with your family. You really got a lot of work to do. With watch lists and game plans up and down.
Yes. Well, there's time for both. There's time for both. And that's a good
Sure.
point, Ed. You know how to juggle it all. All right. And that's a good reminder. We're not going to have a show on Monday because the market's going to be closed. So no IBD live, no stock market today video. We will miss you all, but I know there will be at least one article from our own Ed Carson uh, out over the weekend and Monday. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, we have the levels on both the upside and downside. That's scenario analysis. If this, then, not just for the sunnier side of things, but also for the not so great side of things too. You got to be ready either which way. And so for the S&P 500, we'll keep an eye on more progress next week because with this nice finish, like you said, it would be really nice to see a full-fledged breakout here. Okay, we also want to take a look at the Dow. Give us your perspective, Ed, on the Dow because lots of headlines out there like to talk about the Dow. And so, what's the headline here?
I mean, the Dow's at record highs. It's pretty good here. If you look at the trend, the relative strength line really hasn't it's lagged, generally lagged and lagged and lagged. It's improved a little bit. That for a brief stretch when the market was struggling, the Dow outperformed, but it just didn't fall as much. And so while it hasn't really outperformed the S&P in the last few weeks, it was closer to a high, and so it's moved up. But it's not really like leading. It's just that but it's not lagging either. So that's what we're going on here. So nice action, but we'll see if it can continue to really march higher.
Yeah. Well, let's get your take on the Russell 2000 and what we're seeing with small caps getting back above that 2200 level.
Yeah, like the other things we have a handle here. It's not going to, you're never going to see, well, not to say never, but tight action is difficult for the small cap index. But this is about as tight as you get with a nice little handle here. So again, if you see the S&P and the Nasdaq making progress, this will probably move higher. Big swings up and down the relative strength line. It'd be nice to see small caps have a real committed move. We looked like we were going to have it in July. Here we go. Finally, we're going to get it. I don't know if we will, but a lot of small caps should be on your radar as well.
Mm-hmm. Let's also take a look at 0TNX. This is the 10-year Treasury yield, and I'm going to go to the weekly time frame. So bouncing a little bit this week, but we've been coming off a lot, Ed.
Yeah, I mean, really, we're still in a pretty sharp downtrend in August for the last few months, really since late 2023, and so the Fed we're a few weeks away from the Fed starting to cut rates. The yield curve is close to to stop being inverted. So this has been a real positive trend for the stock market.
And now let's take a look at some breadth measures. Here's RSP. This is the equal weighted S&P 500 ETF, and we are at highs here.
Yeah, it's a lot like the Dow. I mean, so we're seeing because it didn't fall as much, and the RS line really improved when the market started, late in that stage there and held up very well in early August. So didn't have as much to go. But yeah, here we go. I mean, a lot of things here are working. I mean, that's a lot of non-tech, a lot of financials look like this, and insurers. You're seeing things. Some of them, they're have already broken out sometime from these sort of little bases, they weren't quite consolidations, sort of fell down, came right back up. So we're seeing a lot of
Right.
that, seeing industrials, a lot of things that didn't fall off that much and are still going strong here. So a lot of non-tech performance. Not necessarily a lot of the problem is there's not a lot of them aren't necessarily in great positions because they've done this, or not in our
Right.
case. So that's sometimes we don't talk about them as much on these videos because they sort of quickly came up and didn't have this nice ideal setups. Let's put it that way.
Yes, well said. Let's also take a look at QQEW. This is the equal weighted Nasdaq 100 ETF, seeing a cup with handle here, up 1.2% on the day, basically in line with what we're seeing with QQQED.
Yeah, and it didn't, it held above the 50-day line in part because it didn't have Nvidia, which was a big loser this week. But it, generally it has underperformed. I mean, generally it's been a mega cap thing. It would be interesting to see if QQEW could actually outperform the Nasdaq, because there's an argument that maybe some of these mega caps are a little tired or just can't continue to outperform the way they have for so long. We keep talking about, and then they keep out, they take a break and then they kind of keep on outperforming. But it'd be nice to see other areas, other tech areas, take the lead as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's take a look at, so you mentioned NVIDIA, which I do still own at the moment, but let's go to SMH, which represents the chips. A cup with handle, but the positioning of this handle area, not ideal.
Yeah, all below the 50-day line, essentially. It's one thing to be a little bit like the Nasdaq where you dip down below, it's a little shakeout, but this one, it seems like when it breaks out, it's got a real resistance here. And it's definitely lagged. It hasn't bounced back relative strength wise much at all in the last few weeks. So, if Nvidia doesn't come back, these AI names, it's going to be hard for this one to really make a lot of progress.
Yeah. Okay. And then here's IGV, the software ETF, forming a cup with handle as well, but this one above that 50-day line. So looking a little bit better.
Looking a lot better. And there's definitely a lot of names here that, we're seeing a number of software names, around buy points, or actually breaking out. So definitely looking better. Had a real rough stretch. So that's part of it. RS line didn't falter too much in August relatively and hasn't made a lot of progress back. But again, unlike SMH, wasn't down as much.
Right. Exactly. Okay. And you talked about XLF, you talked about XLI. Anything else in terms of the sector action we should be thinking about?
I probably should think about a bunch of them, but let's take a look at PAVE for just a moment. I'm just wondering about that's going to be.
Sure.
Yeah, that one's okay. That one's coming back a little bit. There's probably might be some setups in there, and XRT, but retail is such a grab bag of things out there right now. So that would be. Yeah, so that one's a mixed bag. There's some discounters in certain footwear areas, but it's definitely more specialized.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Great stuff there. Thank you, Ed, for that color. Let's take a look at Broadcom AVGO group here to NVIDIA, and we have earnings from this chip giant next week.
Yeah, and this one has a handle. You can see the high from a couple of weeks ago when it was sort of tried to break out of sort of a pause. It's back above the 50-day line, so that's nice. This one is a chip and software giant, and so it'll be be important to see how this one does. Brought this up because it's probably the most important earnings report out there. And you look on a weekly, trading relatively tightly. I mean, it's not a 3 weeks tight in there, but came up a lot. So if you look in perspective, a 2% drop after that rebound makes a lot of sense. I mean, honestly, a 2% drop ahead of earnings when NVIDIA has a big sell-off.
Right.
Pretty impressive all in all. So we'll have to see how that report goes because we've had, some of these, some of the tech names out there have had some really big gains and some really big losses, but you could probably use that as a handle or even a trend line kind of situation if that moves out. But I will note that there hasn't been much volume in the handle, which is fine. There wasn't much volume on the rebound, and that's just something to watch out. It's like there's a few, I mean, it's nice that it had formed that because that was one reason it was really a little more skeptical in that initial breakout. So at least it's paused here because the run up came on light volume, which was just a little suspect. I know volume can be a little dirty, as we say, but it's still nice to see more real evidence that institutions were taking part. So that's one flaw among on this chart.
Do you have a sense, Ed, of how this might have any sort of ripple effect across the sector?
I mean, I think you can look at in like NVIDIA's like people took a negative view of it, but they did beat views. They raised guidance. If you start seeing more signals, I could see people tipping back on that front. There is one other name. There's probably some other names out there, but ANET is one that uses a lot of Broadcom products. So that one is setting up. I mean, 358.68 is a buy point there. So that one is potentially one that could move out on Broadcom. But yeah, those are just a couple of areas.
Okay, let's take a look at FIX. This is Comfort Systems, the group here building AC and heating products, ranked 39 out of the 197 groups that we track. So pretty high there. We've seen a steadily climbing relative strength line over the last couple of weeks, Ed. And this week, the stock up about 4.4%.
Yeah, it had a relatively tight base except for that, August
One
5th
day.
that, just
Yeah.
put that one day. But it came up here. And so and it was trying to get above the buy point on a daily chart. There was also a short handle that you could have used. It didn't quite close even over that on Thursday, but you could have used that as an early entry. But either way, the handle or this, it got above there. The fundamentals are nice here. Two strong, strong growth and 2/4 of acceleration, and not just modest acceleration. 94 and 40 are pretty good numbers for earnings and revenue. This is an AI adjacent play because looking for cooling products. So that's one reason why this group is in there. It's sort of a weird
Yeah.
situation where defensive names have this super high octane underlying trend. And so it's consolidated for a few months here. Maybe it's ready to go. A number of these names seem to be doing well. But again, this is also like AI, kind of
Mhm.
situation. So you can't think of this necessarily as a non-tech. I'm not sure what to
Yeah.
do with these names, how I should treat them in that space, because
Right.
it's definitely involved in a way that it wasn't until, say, this year.
Exactly. Yeah. Sort of that AI picks and shovels idea.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for that, Ed. Let's also go to NEE. This is NextEra Energy in the utility space.
Yeah. And another AI type adjacent play. We haven't really seen the earnings pick up, but people expect that there's going to be this big ramp up in pricing. So haven't seen that yet with this one. We've seen it with some other utilities, but this is still a defensive play. It's been trading right around here, around the buy point for several weeks. It is really interesting because, again, because of that AI play, you would normally think in a power trend, okay, let's forget about those defensive names. It does help that lower interest rate trend is positive for defensive plays as well. So we've seen REITs do well, and the AI kind of name is out there as well. But this is just one, again, the fundamentals aren't strong like the way comfort systems are. Let's take a look at the weekly chart.
Sure.
I want to, it has a decent yield, and just wanted to take a look at that. The up down volume is really strong. So even though the volume has been really light the last few weeks, you're seeing some strength there. So it's either the AD rating is a C, that's probably related to some of the selling, near the beginning of the base, but the up down volume ratio is really strong.
Mm.
So, the relative strength, yeah, is improved. It didn't really give up much lately. That was definitely a positive, is that while, because it's defensive, you didn't see much selling at all, in that early, there was no real plunge in that early August. Maybe it came off the highs, but it's right there. And you can almost treat this whole
Mhm.
consolidation as a handle to a mammoth consolidation as well.
Right.
So it's shown some nice action here. Definitely one people should be paying attention to.
Yeah. Great insights there, Ed. All right. Anything else in terms of what investors should be doing to prepare for the week ahead, Ed?
Well, also go over your portfolio. We talked about watch list and other things, but also go over your portfolio. There's things that are lagging, or the things that you're thinking, well, maybe I'd like to add on to those things. Grade your stocks and think about that, because that's another way. You don't have to just keep adding. You might decide, you know what, I'm gonna, this one's just done okay. I think I'm gonna sell it and make room for other stocks. That's just something
Right.
else you can do. Among others, you just do that pruning. So again, it's just like spring cleaning is not a bad thing. We've had a little pause here, and we might have some buying opportunities. So just do that as well, along with all the other research you're doing.
Great. Well, thank you, Ed. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Just a reminder, No market on Monday for the Labor Day holiday. So we hope everyone enjoys the time off, or at least the time off from the markets. But hey, gives you time to do that homework, as Ed mentioned, keeping that watch list fresh and reviewing your portfolio, coming up with your game plan for the week if a bullish scenario unfolds or if a downside scenario unfolds. So we'll have to see what we get coming up next week. So once again, have a great weekend, everyone. And we'll see you on Tuesday, starting with IBD Live, investors.com/IBD Live for all the details there, starting 10 minutes before the opening bell. So we'll see you there. And then we'll also see you back here on Tuesday after the close.